So this is just a quick video on the Tektronix 2465 oscilloscope that I was working on for a friend. Originally, he was going to go ahead and replace U800 IC because that's what someone told him was wrong with the scope pretty much. So he was just going to go ahead and buy another IC for $125 off eBay and replace it. Once I saw what the problem was, it wasn't a horizontal problem, and U800 IC has a completely different fault, which is that once it heats up, it actually shrinks down to horizontal when you put a signal through it or you run it at 10x or whatever, and it shrinks down the signal like this. That's how you know if U800 IC's bad. Plus that IC will get really hot to the touch, of course, too. What his problem was, and I'll go and turn this around, see if I can explain it, was that only this top half of the screen would work. The bottom half wasn't displaying nothing and everything was shifted upwards. Well, it turned out the problem was with the readout card. And what happened was, because it took me a while to figure it out because I was tracing everything else but that at first, so it took me a couple hours to figure it out. But what happened was someone at some point tried repairing the low voltage power supply and replacing a couple caps on the low voltage supply, and they didn't put the right value caps too as well, which is a whole nother thing. Someone really hacked this thing up. At some point, I guess, they probably were testing it. The card must have hit ground somehow, and it ended up putting a burnt mark on the card and also taking out the IC on that card as well too. Thankfully it didn't take anything else out on it, so I was able to replace that IC on that card because I have a few of those cards laying around. And I was able to repair the trace on the card as well and clean up the burnt spot on it. I went ahead and also recapped the whole low voltage power supply because I also noticed there was a lot of jitter and stuff like that on the screen. And that's when you have the readout and the signal on at the same time. You'll notice that the readout kind of bounces around and stuff. That was due to bad caps in the low voltage power supply and on the high voltage power supply. And the one that was actually causing it to lose focus and the jitter was actually the 100 UF 25 volt capacitor on the high voltage power supply. As the lead corroded and it was barely connected. And that's why if you would tap the thing, the focus would come in and stuff like that. So I went ahead and replaced the cap and that fixed that issue completely. I also went ahead and recapped the low voltage power supply so you don't have to do no work to the scope pretty much. It's pretty much 100%. The only thing I got left to do is change the fan out. And the reason why I put that fan in and didn't use the original fan was because even though the guy said he replaced the fan, whoever sold him the scope originally, and yeah, you can see where there's flux left over. The IC is actually mounted in the socket as normally it is, and normally it's actually mounted directly onto the board. But you can see the flux residue. So yeah, at some point someone looks like brought a used motor and tried putting it on there, and this didn't work at all. But even if it did work, it has side-to-side plates. Those bearings are shot. That gives you any idea. I mean, you could rebuild these because I've seen online people rebuilt these, but it's very hard to get the bearings for these things. I think it's actually impossible to get the bearings for these, and even then you gotta take the coils out and everything's kind of pain in the neck to do it. So normally what I do is I use this type of fan on there, and this type of fan puts out more CFM anyway and stuff like that into the actual frame. This actually puts out better airflow because I have tested for working one of these and compared it to that, and that puts out a little bit more airflow anyway. So I put that in there. The only thing I got left to do, because he does want the fan running at 100% all the time, so I'm just going to go ahead and put a 12 volt regulator with a capacitor there. I'm going to mount the regulator and use this as the heat sink pretty much. You do have to be careful though for anyone else doing this modification because this is common ground, so you do want to make sure you heat shrink the leads and everything else too as well, so it doesn't short against the case if it's shipped and moved around. So I'm going to go and do that, but that's the last thing I got left to do with this scope. I went ahead and fixed all the other issues, and I'll go and demonstrate and show you that the actual vertical issue is working, and also the jitter's gone too as well. Let me go and get a cord. I got it right over here. Let's plug this in. And it's okay to run it about a fan for a while. It doesn't really get that hot. Let me go and adjust the thing to the screen there. And there you go. Now you can see the screen's perfect pretty much. It's no longer shifted upwards, and there's no jitter pretty much. So go and turn off. Okay. You can see there. Okay, let's go forward. And you can see it works as it should now. And also, let's go ahead and there's nothing wrong with U800 IC, by the way, because I did put a fan on the main board to cool everything down and ran it for a long time, and there was no issues with it. So everything's working properly as it should. Intensity also works good. You can see that the readout and everything's nice and stable. It's not jumping around or anything, so everything's working as it should. I don't want to run this for a really long time because I don't want to damage anything. But yes, I did have to take this motor out, unfortunately, because the motor is shot. So I went ahead and put a fan. I'll send this back if you want it, but you know, there's nothing. I mean, that motor's shot, so why even bother? But as far as the scope go, it is working. There is pretty much no ripple on the power supply, because I also did test that as well too. So it's pretty good and it's ready to go. I also went ahead and replaced the titanium capacitor too as well. So that's why it's nice and clean waveform and everything else like that. And I did put a signal in it earlier and stuff like that, and it's pretty much dead on specs. So okay, let's just do one thing real quick. If I remember. Okay. And then we'll go ahead and run the self-check. And then there you go, and it passes all tests too as well. So now then I'll go and hit AD trigger. And there you go. So the scope is fully functional. Now I'm going to go and turn it off because I don't want to overheat it since I don't got the fan hooked up yet. But there you go. I'll get the fan wired in. I'll put this thing back together and I'll send it right back to you pretty much.